Do what you're supposed to do so you don't do what you're not supposed to do. Do I need to say that again? I want to say that again. Do what you're supposed to do so you don't do what you're not supposed to do. Now let's go to 1 John 3. You go back up to the beginning of the slides there. 1 John 3, 11 through 18. Want to read with me? Let's go ahead and read this. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. We should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brother's righteous. Do not be surprised, brothers, that the world hates you. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brothers and sisters. Whoever does not love abides in death. Verse 15. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. Verse 16. By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brothers in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. So let's go back to that slide. I think it's 12, the main point. Do what you are supposed to do so you don't do what you're not supposed to do. Guys, how many of you know that if you get into a situation, if you get into a dicey situation, let's just say there's an argument or something, and this particular conflict has an opportunity to de-escalate or get a lot crazier. What you do in that moment matters. The problem is, a lot of times is we don't do what we're supposed to do. Or whatever circumstance it is. And I believe that in this text, John is trying to lovingly get to something that is absolutely necessary for our walk with God. And it's this idea of love versus sin, okay? Love versus sin or compromise. You can go to the next slide. Love versus sin or compromise. The context here, we've gone over a lot. I'm just going to do a real quick summary. But the long story short is there were some false teachers that came into the church, and it was people who were really trying to follow Jesus, and John was trying to help them work through that. One of the other points of this is in the city of Ephesus. We've talked about Ephesus. We talked about the Temple of Diana. We've talked about kind of the history there. There were people coming out of really incredibly crazy lifestyles, right? Now, if we can just be frank, the city of Corinth and the city of Ephesus makes Vegas look like, you go to Vegas and you're going to Sunday school. Like the things they were doing there made Vegas look like nothing, right? And so you had people coming out of these lifestyles, and as people were coming out of these lifestyles and they were saying yes to Jesus, they would go kind of against the grain of their culture or their friend group or their families. And people started kind of coming against what they were doing and giving pushback. So not only did they have these false teachers come in, but they were experiencing pushback from the culture that they were in, from their families, from their friends. They're like, what, you're not going to go do this thing that we used to do? What's wrong with you? Oh, you follow Jesus? And they started getting pushback. So one of the things that we see with John is he's trying to help them navigate these two difficult things. And what he says is what it comes down to is in the middle of that, I still want you to love everyone around you. He says, I want you to love those brothers and sisters in the community. I also want you to love your enemy. And if you do things out of love, How many of you know that when we walk in love, it doesn't leave a lot of room for compromise? If I'm walking in love for my wife, it doesn't leave a lot of room for sin or compromise or doing something that's going to hurt her. If I'm walking in love for the community, then there's going to be some things that I do, and there might be some laws that I disagree with because it infringes on my freedom. I feel like, but the question is, am I walking in love, and is this going to be better for the community? You see, if we're walking in love, it takes away this gap or this space or this margin for us to sin or compromise. I want you to think about the story of David and Bathsheba. David didn't do what he was supposed to do, which ultimately was walking in love. He was supposed to go out and fight for Israel during the time when kings went out to war. David did not go out to war. He ended up getting himself into an adulterous situation with someone. If he would have done what he was supposed to do, which would have been motivated by love, then he wouldn't have found himself in that sin. If you think about Cain and Abel, if Cain would have found himself doing what he was supposed to do, which would have been walking in love, then he would have found himself not doing what he wasn't supposed to do. Let's go to the first verse, which is verse 11. Let's look at that. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. For this is a message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. I want you to notice that this isn't being said in a context of a command, but rather in a context of an announcement only. The good announcement is that we should love one another. Right? So John is not coming here and he's saying, you better love. He's saying, hey, there's a better way. There's something awesome I need to tell you about. Like, we get to love people. I know you're getting pushback for your faith. And I know that you're dealing with like some of these teachings and you're trying to navigate it, but I'm still encouraging. This is a good thing. Let's keep loving. Verse 12. We should not be like Cain, who was of the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil and his brother's righteous. So Cain's actions of providing the wrong sacrifice and then murdering his brother both happened ultimately because his heart was not in alignment with God or God's love. If Cain would have done what he was supposed to do, which would have been obedience out of love for God, then he wouldn't have done what he wasn't supposed to do, which was kind of do his own thing on the sacrifice. It got rejected, and then he got upset with his brothers, who was accepted, and ended up murdering his brother. His own deeds were evil, is what the Bible says. What is the alternative to one's deeds being evil? What's the alternative? I would propose that the alternative is that it would be deeds that would be motivated by love, with obedience as a byproduct. Friends, something is going to fill your life. Wherever you're at, whatever context you're in, something is going to fill your life. Is it going to be God and his love? Are you going to walk out in God's love and as a byproduct there's going to be obedience? Or is it going to be something else that acts as a hurtful substitute? Unforgiveness, jealousy, insecurity, hatred, control, lust. If we can understand that this thing inside of us is going to be filled with something, and if we're passive about it, it's going to be filled up with something one way or another. And we have to be intentional and understand that when we walk in the Spirit, we're going to have to get into the Word. We're going to have to get into the community of believers. We're going to have to get into prayer, and getting ourselves postured to walk in love so that we do what we are supposed to do. You see, if you do what you're supposed to do without love, that's what we call legalism. Love has to be the motivation. Verse 13. Do not be surprised, brothers, that the world hates you. Now, why would the world hate you? As I said, this is exactly the situation they were dealing with. They were coming out of a lifestyle that was intense, and they were following Jesus, and they were getting pushback for following Jesus. Now, remember, Jesus said this very thing to those that followed him right after telling them to love one another in the Gospel of John, chapter 15. So there is a connection. When one comes to Christ, they become a new creation and they come into the family of God. They don't identify with the decisions or lifestyles or people they used to identify with. When this happens, you will cause people to think and reevaluate themselves. And for some, that's frustrating and they don't know how to handle that. So Ephesus and the pagan culture and the believers of this time, that's what they were experiencing. So John is repeating what Jesus said. Remember, this author that we're reading was with Jesus. Even up until the point, John himself was up with Jesus until the point of the cross. So John is repeating what Jesus said and understanding that there are false teachers and causing confusion and cultural pushback for following Jesus. What is John trying to get at? He wants them to still walk in love. Why? So they don't fall into the traps that they could fall into, so that they do what they're supposed to do. Verse 14. We know that we have passed out of death into life because we love the brothers and sisters. Whoever does not love abides in death. Here's something that's really important. Theology, which is the study of God. So let's just say theology or what you believe about God is really important because ultimately it will form your outward actions. My friends, if love is not a part of what you believe about God, then I don't believe it's true biblical theology. And there's a lot of things out there that we have to guard against. We have to guard against unforgiveness. We have to guard against strife. We have to guard against all these things. But my friend, if I can propose to you that one of the ways that we guard against those things, one of the ways that we keep ourselves from doing the things we shouldn't do, one of the things that we do that to help keep us in alignment with the Lord is making sure that love for God first and love for people is a priority in our life. Let's go to verse 15. Everyone who hates his brother is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life abiding in him. Once again, catch the connection between the language being used here and the story of Cain killing his brother Abel. Jesus himself said that if you hate your brother or sister, that it is as if you've murdered them or her in your heart. This is in Matthew 5. Let's just read it real quick. Matthew 5, 21 through 22. It's not going to be up there. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who's angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to hellfire. And what he's saying, and in this cultural context, what he's saying is if you have contempt for your brother or sister that's unresolved and you don't make effort towards it, it is as if you've murdered him. And this is how serious Jesus is about wanting us to make things right with our brothers and sisters. So John, who was with Jesus, remember, is repeating Jesus to these hurting and confused Christians who are dealing with the backlash of weird teaching and dealing with the backlash of some pushback for their faith. And he's trying to help them understand this process of walking from death to life. And how do we know someone has walked from death to life? It's from love. Verse 16, by this we know that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. So then John turns the conversation to what loving others looks like. So he's saying, hey, you're in this hard situation, and what I want you to focus on is love. I know we need to work out through some of this teaching stuff and this theology stuff, and I know that you're dealing with some of this persecution and pushback from following Jesus, but guys, I think what the best thing to do now is for you to not fall into a pitfall, is for you to focus on love. But now he turns it to, what is love? How do we know what love is? We look at Jesus. Listen to me. If we want to know what love is, we look at Jesus. We look at the exalted one, the Lamb who was slain, the risen conquering Lion of Judah, Jesus, who is the divine expression of God himself. We look at Jesus, the perfect example of perfect love. What Jesus displayed was self-sacrificial love for even his enemies, which was the complete opposite reaction of Cain that we read in the Bible. It was the exact opposite end. One was to take life, and one was to give life up for. What if Cain postured in his heart to serve Abel, even to the point of giving his life? Okay, I just want you to think about this for a second. Cain who killed Abel. What if Cain said, I messed up, God. Okay, I'm sorry for this. How can I serve this situation better? Hey, Abel, I love you. I'm glad your sacrifice was taken. How can I serve this situation better? Imagine if Cain postured his heart for that. But instead, he didn't have love, and he found himself doing something that he shouldn't have done, which was murder his brother. Is there a place to set boundaries and protect yourself? 100%. I'm a huge advocate for that. I'm not saying we should tolerate abuse. However, if while we navigate our walk with God and our walk with others, if we make self-sacrificial love a priority, how much sin and brokenness and dysfunction and pain and severed relationships could we avoid? I'm serious. If we make love of God and love of people a priority, how much stuff will we avoid? How much sin will we avoid? Let's go to verse 17. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brothers in need, yet closes his heart against them, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. So here John is providing a practical example of what it is like to do what you're supposed to do. Do you guys see where I'm getting at? He's providing a practical example of what it's like to do what you're supposed to do, so you don't do what you're not supposed to do, by walking in self-sacrificial love for God and others. There's actually a practical proactivity to this walk with God. And it's not a works-based thing to get to heaven, right? We talk about that a lot. We don't get to heaven by doing things. But when we follow Jesus and we walk in love, there is a proactivity. This looks like the greatest commandment that we read from the mouth of Jesus himself. I don't know the anger that you might be holding. I don't know the anxiety or depression. But what I do know is that when we posture our hearts to walk in love for God and for people, something shifts. I want us to take a moment of introspection and ask the Lord if there's anything that maybe specifically in our life, we can be convicted, we can just ask him to search your heart. There's something that we shouldn't be doing right now. And I want us to ask the Lord to help us replace that with what we should be doing. And I would propose that 100% of the time, if we ask the Lord to search our hearts, whatever that is connected to something with love. Love for God, love for people, even love for yourself. Is God challenging a spirit of offense in you that has led you to harboring unforgiveness in your life towards someone? It could be that God is asking you to make the switch in your heart to forgiveness and self-sacrificial love. And that results in a proactivity of putting that individual before yourself. Is it, are you someone who struggles with substance addiction? I would propose that that too is connected to love. Not only love to God, others, but love for yourself. The Lord is gentle and he's good. And he's usually a still small voice. And he has already come to you about that thing. Can I be vulnerable with you? There's a lot of times the Lord speaks to me about stuff and it's a still small voice and I put it off. And I've been in a process of trying to hone my spiritual ears to hear God speak in that still small voice and obey. So let's take a moment of reflection if we can. I'm going to play guitar a little bit. We'll take just a few seconds. We'll take a minute. Take a moment of reflection and ask the Lord to search our hearts and convict us and ask us to replace what we shouldn't be doing with what we should be doing. And the question that we ask is, how is love involved in this? Just take a moment of reflection, please.